it's pleasant to look at the roster and see all the people here who I know and many of whom have operated on the railroad. I hope I don't put them to sleep. Um, what I'm going to talk about is my Virginian layout. It memorializes the Virginian between Norfolk and Roanoke in 1959. Oh, come on. Oops. Okay. For decades, Sarah, my partner, has been asking me why I don't put a lab into our 13 by 39-foot basement room. I didn't know what to do, so I went to Bob Reed, who I knew from our Southern Maryland operating group, but who had moved to Florida, but was still as close as email. He says to me, it's easy. There's three questions. What do you want to do? Easy. The Virginian. Where? Norfolk to Roanoke. This means no electrics. I love the electrics, but for an operated layout, I'm told there'll be a lot of trouble. And as John Sethian says, uh, overhead requires constant maintenance beyond what you need for just track. Finally, when 1959, the Virginian's last year as an independent operation, and also no steam. I'd noticed on Bob's layout that steam locomotives were challenging. Further, the division had a clinic by Bob Sprague on layout design. The lesson I took from his session was that all rooms have challenges, and mine included. And I didn't wish to fix them with gates or lift outs. The challenge with gates and lift outs to me is that the tolerance for track, I think, is about 1/100th of an inch. And gates and lift outs are things measured in inches of feet. So getting them to hit the 100th of an inch seems to me to be a challenge. Let's get specific. Here's what my room looks like. There's a door to the outside on one side. There's a door to the stairs on the other side. And in one corner, there's a door to the bathroom and the lounge. And I don't want to block any of those doors for obvious reasons. The outside door is a safety thing. The bathroom door, well, look at the age of people like me who are running the railroad. And the door to the stairs, how are you going to get in and out? Bob sent me a note with a little bitty scribble on the bottom here, which suggested that offset blobs might make it possible to deal with this space. A blob, of course, is a, I think, John Armstrong term for a piece of benchwork and layout in which trains can turn 180. And these things are, of course, monstrous. If you started with 18-inch radius, they're 3 feet. And of course, nobody wants to do something that small. So I thought he had something, but basically what Bob had given me is a cocktail napkin drawing. And one of our big principles from geometry is that a picture is not a proof. So I recreated his drawing using a kitchen design tool, and because that forced me to use actual measurements. And here it is. Basically, what this tells me is that his offset blob idea works. I have reasonable aisle width, and I have lots of running room for the railroad. So I hired Bob Sprague. He looked at the space I had and told me I could have 5 towns. I'm a Virginian fan, but I don't really know all that much about the Virginians. So I pulled out the Virginian timetable and looked at it and noticed that there were 5 towns that were bold-faced. Uh, so these became my towns. I got track diagrams for them from the Norfolk and Western Historical Society, sent them to him. Later, he said, oh, you can have one more. So I added Alberta. It was chosen because my aunt was named Alberta. That's it. That's just Bob's website in case you decide, like I did, that you need expert design help. After much work, uh, here is Bob's Bob's more or less final design. And as you can see, there's lots of running room. What's not shown in this picture is that under Suffolk, I have double-ended staging. Uh, Things about the design. As is the case on a lot of these railroads, east is to the right, west is to the left. But vertically, trains go down from Norfolk to Roanoke, which is the reverse of real geography. And that's necessary for the double-ended staging. I wanted double-ended staging because it's a device to reduce the workload on the railroad host. Single-ended staging, you put a train in staging, its caboose and locomotive are in the wrong ends, and you got to fix that. Double-ended staging, you just pull out and you're right. Just flip some cards. The major yard, Victoria, is far from staging, which means we don't have the kind of jobs that I've seen and disliked on several railroads where you're running a train from staging to major yard and they're adjacent. Um, you recognize these jobs because as a newcomer, you bid on them and none of the regulars do. The eyes are bearable. Owls are bearable. Um, the One of the things I worried about was that when I see an O-scale layout, um, it always strikes me as being a lot like being down in the submarine. And I don't mean one of these cushy nuclear boats. I mean a World War II diesel boat. The aisles are bearable, and in fact, we had an open house, and even with lots of people there, the aisles were not a problem. The design process took about a year. Now what? My goal in stepping into this is to host operating sessions. Also, I'm not a sensational carpenter. Um, I got my electrical certificate partly on an adopted 4x6, and it has a ramp. And the ramp porpoises, it kind of goes up and down. And it's unfortunate because it's steep enough that the porpoising will cause some locomotives to stall. Um, Twice, I've sat down with a tape measure and a spreadsheet and refigured things, adjusted the pylons, and I can move where the bounces are, but I can't get rid of them. And I didn't want to have a room full of that noise. Finally, I'm 78 years old. I was 77 when I was first reflecting on this thing. And I was thinking, I don't have endless time to enjoy this railroad. And I don't really want to put years of unpleasant work that I'm not good at in front of it. So I decided to hire a layout builder. I identified a half dozen viable builders. Impressive there are that many out there. I fired one of them. Some of them didn't want to build the design. Um, and some for reasons I agree with. The space in hidden staging, as you will see in a moment, is fairly tight, and some builders thought that was too tight. My take is maybe so, but to fix that would mean steepening the grades, and that didn't feel attractive. Anyhow, I settled on David Bennett of traininstallations.com and am convinced I got it right. Good to be smart is better to be lucky. I hit them at a time of low backlog. I insisted on a site visit before the build started. The reason for this is that I'm lousy at measuring things. And I wanted them to build a layout based on their measurements of the room, not mine. And it's a good thing I did. By the time Dave got done measuring the room, he decided that the railroad needed to be shortened by, I think, 6 inches in the long dimension. And he was right. I ordered it without scenery other than ballasting, and there are a couple reasons for that. First, the only NMRA Achievement Program certificate I might still want to get is scenery. So I need to leave that open. We'll come back to that later. And also the guy on whose former railroad I've operated many times tells me that the Virginia really didn't have trees or rocks, just track on plywood. And who am I to argue with Mike? Here is a shot of the railroad being reassembled in the room. The train installations is based in Georgia, and they built the whole thing there, disassembled it, trucked it up, and reassembled it here, and that's what they're doing. There are a lot of surprises in this experience. I thought I was an expert on Digitrax. What I was an expert on is using a UT4R throttle. Okay, and that really is about it. Now, the Digitrax systems my friends had were not what Digitrax is now selling. It's a new and different system in some ways. Um, and one of the big surprises is that fascia plugs aren't as important. You don't need them to acquire locomotives with the new throttles. I've probably overconfigured it. Got it with two boosters. And since everybody I know had UT4R throttles, I wanted to add that capability. So I got an old radio and added it to the mix. So I can do any old kind of Digitrax throttle. Dale Latham came by and said, you know, if I was starting over, I'd make my layout 48 inches. I went with that. That means Suffolk is 54 inches because it's over the hidden staging. I ended up having to order a custom step stool from an 8C seller for Suffolk so that people could work Suffolk. And it's also useful for younger visitors who really can't see much with the 48-inch layout height. So as I said earlier, the intent of the layout is operating sessions, which really means grown-ups running trains, not entertaining kids. But I'm not opposed to having kids enjoy it. So here's what we look at. You can see my hidden staging there, as well as the town of Suffolk and the step stool that I got. This is an area where I'm still coming to grips with things. My starting point for turnout controls was ground throws, but it turns out there are three areas where that's not going to cut it. The first, of course, is hidden staging. The second is distant turnouts in Suffolk. Suffolk is both the highest and the widest spot on the layout, and the back turnouts you couldn't reach ground throws on, so it's got switch motors. And finally, the Alta Vista main coming out of staging. That's at the very top of the diagram I showed you. What I think is going on there is that the builders felt that the Alta Vista main is on the other side of a lot of layout and view block from the control panel. So that if you set the control panel for somebody to come out of hidden staging in Alta Vista, there was a real risk that in the words in the Star Wars movie, they'd have a real short trip because they'd hit a turnout set the wrong way and get derailed. So the DCC controlled turnouts there are a good thing. Here's the control panel. And as you can see, I got six tracks of staging. I got 6 buttons to select the 6 routes. I got occupancy lights to tell me if something's going on. I'm thrilled that the locomotives are detected. I read about, just put low resistors on all of your wheel sets. And it's not a movie I want to star in. The UT4R throttles can't throw DCC controlled turnouts, which is what we've got in Alta Vista. So I had them add push buttons under the fascia to control them. One operator has suggested paired buttons on the staging panel. He thought that wouldn't cost much. I wonder how many hundreds of dollars it would cost. And I haven't been persuaded to order that yet. Knowing that the layout was coming, I stocked up on Virginian Trainmaster locomotives. At the time I ordered the layout, I had three DCC locomotives. I had an Atlas Virginian Trainmaster. I had an Amtrak electric, and I had a Baltimore trolley, Peter Witt, I think. And I'm thinking that really isn't what you need to support a big layout like this. So I stocked up on the Trainmasters, and I was very fortunate to find Tom Matty, who was immensely helpful in turning an assortment of misfits into a locomotive roster. But I keep discovering that maybe I'm really a rivet counter, a secret rivet counter. The Trainmasters really lived west of Roanoke. What they had at least east of Roanoke was little Fairbanks Morse's H1644s. Now, I tried to get Bachman H1644s DCC. I have sent them to three different DCC installers with good repute. Two of them have thrown up their hands and sent the locomotive back to me. A third has lost the locomotive somewhere in their premises. So I was kind of pessimistic about getting it right. I was whining about this at my regular railroad lunch, and two friends suggested two new Midwest installers. And as I say, since I have lots of these H1644s that have been to installers and back, I I sent one each off to each of the suggested services, and back came two DCC H1644s. I was thrilled. I since had them do a couple more, so I have a whole fleet of each. I'm starting to use them in operating sessions. I've had a couple of tune-up visits for the railroad. The first was perhaps the most intense. I had them put town name labels on all of the towns. I had them illuminate the hidden staging with rope LEDs. That's a big help for dealing with just derailments and stuff. The design, I didn't pay enough attention to the design for the Victoria Yard, so that as built, we ended up without direct access from the west to all the Victoria tracks, and that was unfortunate. So they fixed that. Additionally, I had a list of all of the sidings on the railroad, and I went around and glued them all to the siding, so I knew what was what. I got all done, and I ended up with one extra label, and it turned out that was a missing interchange track. And I understand that on the design, it was really just a line. It didn't have a label on it, and the builders missed that. And worse yet, I'm looking at things and seeing that there's a big 2x4 right where that track ought to go. But they were able to move the 2x4, put the track in. They added push buttons for the Alta Vista crossover and the new interchange track. I think interchange tracks are important because the railroad where I earned my dispatcher certificate was like a lot of these operated railroads. I have this list of things you have to have for an operated railroad, and then I discover railroads that operate wonderfully and are missing one on my list. Keith Stillman's railroad was missing staging. And I think the trick was instead he had lots and lots of interchange tracks. So losing an interchange track from my design was not something I wanted to put up with. So I'm glad we had that fixed. Finally, I added a fascia plug. I'm still fighting the last war. Operating sessions have been interesting. I think I mentioned I have the dispatcher certificate, but it still has left me with challenges. Operating scheme design is hard. Nobody liked my initial design, including me. Version 2 has supported several sessions, and Dale Latham and Bill Roman were just immensely helpful in thinking through how it ought to look. And interestingly, there's less staging in the second operating scheme uh, involvement than my initial. There were some Digitrax challenges. Operating sessions revealed a couple of issues with the installation related to engines crossing between power districts on a busy railroad. And Gil Fuchs was just tireless in identifying and correcting the problems. Thank you, Gil. And one of the things that was a kind of a byproduct of those DCC problems is something I've dubbed demonic possession. That is, an idle locomotive takes off like a bat out of hell. It's just sitting on a track, not being run, and suddenly, bang, it's off like a rocket. What we think is happening there is that a layout electrical event has caused the decoder to think it's not on DCC. And this is a dual mode decoder. So once it's decided it's not on DCC, it looks at the track voltage and says, oh my God, the throttle is pedal to the metal, and takes off. So what I've done is use Decoder Pro to turn off the DC capability on all of my locomotives. So they're now incapable of demonic possession, I hope. My current operating scheme involves 4 jobs. 2 of them leave from Victoria. The Suffolk turn goes east. The Alta Vista turn goes west. The Suffolk shifter works the town of Suffolk and takes and exchanges cars with the Suffolk turn. And then there's a through train. It starts in staging, goes to Victoria and back. And in the middle acts as the Victoria yardmaster. I'm considering adding a few things. I considered a cold drag, and I actually have one sitting in hidden staging. I've got an empty. I'm thinking about an empties drag, and I'm thinking about a passenger train. All of these will require a fast clock and a timetable, of course. My first operating session was in August of last year. I've had 12 subsequently, and I've had 23 operatives. So the thing has been a huge success. Interestingly, a couple sessions ago, I was standing right near Suffolk and being struck that I had 4 different people who were all running trains on the railroad and thinking, my goodness, this is a total success. It's just what I wanted. At this point, one of the Smale switch machines dropped his throw rod to the floor. Fortunately, the gentleman who was working in Alta Vista at the time is a member of the Vienna Club and is intimately familiar with a tortoise style switch machine. So I got him a stool so he could work under the layout. I got him a few tools, and he got the throw rod back in and was able to finish the job he was working on. And this was particularly fortunate because if we're talking twin coil machines, I'm your guy. Uh, I can deal with them with great success, but I've got very limited experience with the tortoises. Uh, had a second tune-up visit in February of this year, and we connected track status lights to 2 of the fascia plugs. We continuous charging power in the fascia plug so that when the lad is shut down, I can charge my throttles. We fixed a dead spot on the lane turnout in Alta Vista. When I started using the H1644s, they being of 4-wheel trucks and shorter wheelbase, they noticed dead spots in the way that the train masters don't. So that's what put me on that. Had them adjust 7 turnouts around the layout that were being fussy and free up 1 stuck turnout in staging, eliminated a bump in West Victoria that presented as a breaking tube. And we started when we were researching Alta Vista turnout control. I've thought a lot about how this caught me up short, and it goes like this. A a properly wired turnout in HO typically has the property that if a locomotive approaches it and the turnout is set against it, probably what you're going to get is a short circuit. Now, if you've got an MRC power pack, this is no big deal. You turn down the potentiometer and then hit the button for the turnout controller. It throws the turnout so that you eliminate the short circuit, and you crank the rheostat back up, and the train moves on. The difference is that on a DCC railroad, there ain't no rheostat. Power goes to the track continuously. And when you get a short circuit, power stops going to the track. And the question then is, well, where does the power for the turnout controls come from? And the answer is in Suffolk, it's someplace other than track power. In hidden staging, it's something other than track power, but there's a story there. And in Alta Vista, it was track power. So this visit helped them figure out what we needed to happen to fix that. Shortly after they left, the major turnout in Suffolk developed a short. That is, you run an engine over and there's short circuits. And I don't know how that happened. We still haven't figured it out. But I'm a mainframe computer guy. So when I look at a Tortoise or Smale switch machine, I think that's a logic card. You need a socket to plug into it. And part of my thinking here is if that switch machine ever gets sick, I'd like to be able to remove it and put in a different one and not have to do a lot of soldering under the layout to accomplish that task. And what I discovered was in dealing with the short circuit, pulling off the socket from the switch machine really made it all a lot easier. We haven't figured out yet what's actually gone wrong there, but it did allow me to work around the problem and get the layout running again. The most recent tune-up visit, they fixed the Alta Vista turnout control issue. They connected the track status indicator on the radio, the old radio throttle machine. We still haven't figured out the turnout short in Suffolk, and I figured out I needed to individually research the hidden staging turnouts, and so I went through and systematically ran a locomotive into a turnout set the wrong way in hidden staging. There are 9 turnouts. You might think, well, there's 2 legs to this thing. Why isn't it even numbered? And the answer is because I got 2 tracks coming out of Alta Vista, so that reduces the number of turnouts. But anyway, I got 9 turnouts. 6 of them have the property that you pull into them, you get a short circuit, turnout power is then restored, and you can hit a button to throw on the panel to correct the problem. 2 of the turnouts have the property that once you've had the short, turnout power doesn't return and you're stuck. And that's kind of unfortunate. You got to push the locomotive off of the short. One of them has an even worse property, and that is that you don't get a short. And how that goes is that the locomotive will bull its way through the turnout without difficulty. Of course, the rest of the train will not be as successful. So you now have a train dumped in hidden staging. The hidden turnout control will be a topic of the next visit, I think. Here's a picture of Victoria, staged and ready. It's somewhat of an early picture. One of the things that has happened is that various people, um, certainly civilians who look at the railroad as non-model railroaders, tell me they think it isn't done. And that puzzles me since I've had 13 operating sessions already, which suggests to me it's done. Um, but they keep thinking there need to be more structures. My friends are of the school of nature abhors a vacuum and have been gifting me with structures so that if you were to see Victoria today, there's a lot more stuff here than is shown in the picture. And this leaves me puzzling about the scenery certificate. I'm wondering if I can earn the scenery certificate by curating the scenery rather than building it. We'll see. The big lesson to me of this whole experience is that a lot of people have contributed to the success of my railroad, and I'm blessed to have all of them in my life. Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, Bill. It's Greg. I was questioning, you said that, or I got the impression you said the train masters, a couple people had problems. Was it putting decoders in them? If that's the case, what was the reason behind that? Are they really tight or something?
Well, almost all of them came with decoders.
Oh.
And I had a really nasty experience trying to put a decoder in a what was it? A Sperry Rail Services brass thing. And I vowed I'd not get involved in putting decoders in anything ever again because it was just very torturous. But I started getting worried about not having enough locomotives, and I got a train master that um, that didn't have a decoder, and I went to Digitrex and says, "What do I need for this thing?" And they told me. And I attempted to install the thing, and I managed to what I got was a decoder and a, uh, a plug, a plug-in set of wires.
Mm.
And I managed to snap one of the wires trying to bend it to fit it to the plug. I'm kind of thinking that just because Digitrax told me this is the right decoder for this locomotive, maybe it wasn't as thorough a research as I expect I get from, say, Katie about what coupler to put in a car. Um, what I found was that when they sent me a replacement wire harness, I found that I could get the decoder to work if I installed the thing upside down. Um, and and um, and basically I was willing to quit while I was ahead at that point, since I'd rather have it work with a decoder and not have a headlight than have nothing.
Mm.
Fortunately, Tom Matty came in and had a different kind of wiring harness, so that now that locomotive has both DCC and a headlight. Hooray! Other challenges were that one of my train masters was actually had a broken truck,
Oh.
and the builders observed this in the course of the installation. They're like, "Hey, you got a DCC locomotive?" I says, "Here, take this." And it's my oldest one. And turns out it's got a bad break in the truck. I managed to get replacement truck parts from Atlas. It was a bit challenging. I mean, is it the left or the right piece? And after going back and forth on this and driving myself crazy, I decided, well, why don't I just order both pieces? And a dear friend of ours had has a refrigerator that she ordered, and I think one of the doors was messed up, and so she kept ordering the replacement door and getting the wrong one. I figured if I have both, I got an excellent chance that one of them will be right. So Tom put the proper his parts back together,
Hmm.
cursing me all the while. It was a lot of trouble. Another one of these train masters um had the property that you told it to go, and it would sit and think for a while, which was really enjoyable if you were switching. And this gets a little crazy. I had reported this problem on the Norfolk and Western or the Virginian groups.io thing years ago. And all sorts of people had bizarre answers for what you should do about this. None of them right. Things like, well, take out the flywheels. Um, and I'm thinking, that kind of surgery does not appeal to me. Thank you very much. Um, and I mentioned this to Tom, and he says, "Oh yeah," he says that particular decoder has this switch at configuration variable 250 or something, and you just throw that, and it'll behave like you like. And once this, it turns out there's nothing better than having people who really know a lot about this stuff and
Yeah,
can tell
Tom
you
really
the
does
answers
know.
in the back of the book. So I flipped that, and this thing started behaving decently. So that's my experience with the train masters. I mean, I think they're lovely locomotives, and I think that I was a little bit unlucky.
Thank you.
You, anybody else?
Well, Bill, it sounds like everybody has their questions answered.
Sounds like it to me.
Actually, I have another question. I didn't
Talk to
want
me.
to overstep my turn, but if everybody's waiting, how was it dealing with the builders? You say they built it down there and then they brought the pieces up. All their measurements were correct and everything fit as they were putting it in?
Yes. I mean, I'm just absolutely thrilled with every part of the process. Um, I mean, one of the things that this experience has taught me is that going in, there's a lot of stuff I didn't know, or hadn't really thought about. I mean, the whole business of how do you check a powered turnout in a DCC railroad was just a topic that had never occurred to me had any kind of moment, and I now see that it's a very big deal. Um, the bit that the DCC that I bought is not the DCC that my friends had, or Digitrax, I should say,
Mhm.
that my friends have, was was another big surprise. But my sense is that the builders um, did a lot to protect me from myself.
Um, when you were uh, searching them out, did they have references like other layouts that you could see pictures of that they had built?
Well, they gave me references, and I talked to a number of people
Uh-huh.
about them, and I I realized as I was doing that I picked up a pattern, and that was that all the people that they on their initial list live in Georgia. Um, so that there's a lot of, well, and we've had a problem, they come right over.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking easy for you to say.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, the essential situation for me is that, they finish building the railroad and they depart. And suddenly it's me in the basement, me in the railroad. So that was a concern. But I they gave me some remote references as well, and they were similarly enthusiastic. An interesting thing came out in talking to the Georgia people, which is that the builders are actually willing to take on an existing railroad.
Hmm.
I found that nothing sort of amazing. I'm thinking, if I ran such a business, I'd have to be very hungry to take on somebody else's mistake with the thought that I might be able to correct it.
Or maybe they're
Um,
just very confident, which could be a good sign.
uh, what can I say? Eh, uh, I heard all sorts of good stuff from the references.
That's good.
Anybody else? Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, Bill, I'll ask a question. Where are you going with this? What's next on your agenda for the railroad?
Yeah. Well, the project I'm currently just about done with is handrails. Tom came for an operating session and was unhappy with the handrails on the locomotives. And I understand that because basically there were kind of three situations there. There were handrails that were on when we were right. There were handrails that were on that were cockeyed. There were handrails that were not on but were in the boxes. Well, I've been working along on this, and I'm now essentially one handrail short of being done with getting good handrails on all the locomotives. I've gotten the last one painted, and thank you, Martin. And I'm going to put that on today or tomorrow. One of the big next things is to take the big fast clock that you saw at the operating session and get it mounted in its bracket high enough up that everybody in the room can see it. Um, that's a big piece of the list. Since I feel like if I'm going to put a passenger train on the railroad, I really need to have a timetable to govern that train. And if you can't, if the people don't have access to the fast clock, um, that's a problem. I should mention that at the operating session you were at, uh, everything except the one handrail was in place on the locomotives. Other things, one of my lunch people said, "Hey, I'll build you a car shop and paint it up in Virginian colors. What are they?" And it's hard to resist such a thing. And you saw it on the layout, but it's not really installed. I got to do things like cut a hole for the inspection pit and stuff like that. So that's on my list as well.
I mean, is your plan to eventually scenic the entire railroad or just certain portions to get your scenery certificate?
Um, I mean, the hope would be to do it all. Um, but it's not urgent. That is the installation of the car shop at this point is very much a scenery thing. That is, it needs to be really mounted on the board and have track connected and have it really fit in. Um, but it's also true, and you may have noticed this, that um, when you're operating on a railroad, certain amount of tunnel vision sets in. You pull into a town and there's, say, a piece of 2x4. It has the town name on it. The operator, the scenery fanatic may look at that and say, "Ah, that isn't so much." But the operator looks at it and says, "Oh, this is great. I know where I am. I can read the timetable now." Real tunnel vision sets in. So scenery's on my list, but it's not urgent.
But you'll need to install passenger stations if you're going to run a passenger train, right?
Well, I've got stations at all of the towns. Um, and I think most of them actually have signs on them. Um, and most of them are not Virginian stations. The society is threatening to produce another Virginian station, so I will then have one more.
Bill, have you seen, is there any adjustment to folks? I know that the conventional wisdom that you have to have the layout against the walls, and you've got an island layout, maybe with an island with an anchor, if I want to kind of describe it. Is there any, has there been any adjustment for folks trying to deal with the situation? Is it where they just kind of drop into the milieu of the or the essence of the layout easily?
Um, I don't think it's been a challenge. I hadn't really thought about this, but it's certainly the case that given all the openings and the walls that I have, and around the walls layout would have a lot of trouble. You'd have a lot of duck unders or gates or something, and I wanted none of those. So, and people have not expressed frustration that it's not around the walls.
Okay.
Maybe they've thought that, but they haven't expressed it.
Okay, I'll make a comment there. Having operated there probably, I guess, 4 times now. And for whatever reason, nobody else has wanted to operate Suffolk, which is the town that you have to use the stool on to be able to reach everything. My observation about Suffolk, to start with, is I would be worried if it got too much more scenery, any high-rise scenery, that I would probably knock it over given what I would have to reach in order to do any kind of switching, because it's a very interesting area to switch. I rather enjoy challenges on switching. It takes some thought. I mean, I may be in a minority on that, but I do enjoy that, and I have enjoyed operating the Suffolk area. I've operated one other of the turns, and I can't remember which one it was. My biggest problem there was not knowing the towns on Virginia, on the Virginia that are mentioned, because I'm more familiar with the Norfolk Western and the towns it ran through than I was on the Virginian, because the Virginian, in my short knowledge of it, was a straight to coal fields, stopped in Norfolk to change, or in Richmond to change engines, and moved on to the piers at Norfolk and didn't do much in between. So trying to understand where I was on the other 2 divisions or areas took some learning, and I'm sure I'd pick it up after I operated on those areas more often than Suffolk. But I really enjoyed Suffolk, even though I had to stand on a stool, and the stool is sufficient that I really didn't have to get off of it often to do any switching. So it was a very interesting area to operate. That's my comment on it.
Those are excellent points. When somebody gifts me with an assortment of structures, the first thing I do is I create an inventory of them, and I measure their dimensions, X, Y, and Z. X and Y because at some level, even though it's not against a wall, this is a shelf layout. so that there are a lot of spaces where you might want to put something where there's not much real estate to put it in. But I also check height, because just as you say, in Suffolk, high foreground structures are just nothing but trouble. The criticism about knowing where you are is apt. Perhaps I've forgotten to issue it, but I have little 3x5 cards that have all the station names in order. I think I figured out to do that after the first session, because while the railroad is in terms of station order geographically accurate, that doesn't mean anybody knows the relationship of Alberta, Jared, and Brookneal, let alone Alta Vista.
Correct.
So I need to do better about that, handing out those cards. And similarly, a lot of my emphasis is on identifying structures to put in Suffolk, because I want to put signs on the buildings to help people figure out where they're trying to put the cars they're dropping. And I have probably not put anywhere near as many structures in the rest of the railroad, which means that somebody doing either of the turns is at risk of having no idea where in Jared an industry is. Notwithstanding, I'm thrilled you were able to come and run your part of the railroad. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, Bill, I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, providing information on your layout. Very interesting to me. And I'm sure that the other folks here found it interesting also.
Hey, thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
So if nobody else has anything else, I'll go ahead and we'll stop the recording here and